Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Lakewood 8 RTD Board of Directors Candidate Forum. I'm Mark Koberich. I'll be your moderator today in this effort to help you, the voter, put a face on the candidates in your district and get an understanding of where those candidates stand on the issues that you care about the most. All of the candidates running for seats on the board were invited to be part of our discussion for this broadcast. RTD is a massive, complex public entity covering all or part of 8 Colorado counties, touching potentially some 3 million people and spending vast amounts of taxpayer dollars. Those dollars are controlled by a total of 15 board members, each representing a specific geographic area, each with some 200,000 constituents, each director earning $12,000 a year plus expenses in 4-year terms. Elections are staggered so that 8 seats are open in one general election, 7 in the next. The Denver Metro Mayors Caucus is sponsoring our forum in cooperation with Lakewood 8. Views expressed in the forum are those of the candidates, not the views of the Denver Metro Mayors Caucus, RTD, or Lakewood 8. The Denver Metro Mayors Caucus has provided all the questions for the candidates. We should also note that the caucus is a non-partisan political organization that neither supports or opposes candidates. So, let's take a look at the district boundaries for this forum. District I covers part of the north-central part of the Metro Denver area. Its boundaries are roughly Yellowstone Road to the north, East County Line Road to the east, 120th Street to the south, and North 95th Street to the west. This area includes most of Longmont, Lafayette, and Broomfield. Let's meet the candidates running for the RTD board seat in District I. The incumbent board member is Judy Lubau. She was elected to the board in November of 2012. Judy is a retired attorney with over 30 years of public service experience. Just before becoming a director for RTD, she worked for the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, where she was a Clean Air Act enforcement attorney handling pollution cases from the transportation sector. She faces 2 challengers. First, Longmont resident Veronique Bellamy. Bellamy is a transit writer who has been critical of the RTD board, saying that she will work more aggressively toward completion of Fast Track's passenger service between Denver and Longmont, which was approved by voters in 2004 but now has a completion date of sometime in the year 2040. Also in the race, Lee Kemp. He is a former RTD board member who was actually chairman of the board for 5 consecutive terms during his tenure. During that period, RTD received the Best Transit Agency in North America award from the American Public Transportation Association. Kemp is a 35-year public transit veteran. Welcome to all of you. Thanks for being part of our forum today. Each candidate will now be given 2 minutes to speak for an opening statement and 1 minute at the end of our broadcast today for closing comments. And after opening statements, I'll ask as many questions as time allows us during this broadcast, and each candidate will have the chance to respond with a 2-minute limit per response, and we'll rotate the opportunity to answer first where we can. So we've agreed to be informal today. We will use first names. So Judy, you will go first. You have 2 minutes for your opening statement.
Thank you, and thank you for the opportunity to talk with you. The reason that I ran for the board in 2012, it's the same reason that I'm running again. I believe that when government promises to do something for its taxpayers, it has both a legal and moral obligation to do it. And personally, as a former government employee, I was personally offended by the fact that we promised the voters to give us our rail, and that just wasn't happening. And I couldn't understand it, frankly. I just couldn't understand it, so I wanted to get on the board, and I did. And getting on the board, I learned a lot of things. I learned basically that the money has been spent, unfortunately. Fast Tracks was undercapitalized for all that it needed to do. So what we need to do is raise more money and cost save in order to get our rail sooner. And I've been doing those 2 things. I've been fighting for those 2 things in the 4 years that I've been there. I am the one candidate with the proven record of actually moving Fast Tracks forward, and I'll be glad to talk about that in the future questions. Basically, I'm the person who's on the ground. I know the issues, I know the people, I know the negotiations, I know what's happening with Fast Tracks and the transit issues, and I don't have a learning curve. There's an enormous learning curve to learn on this issue. So therefore, I suggest that you stay the course and stay with the person that's been working hard for you and actually making some progress on Fast Tracks and getting us our rail sooner rather than later. Thank you.
All right, Judy, thank you. Veronique, now your opening statement, and please include 1 line at least about your experience with NOAA Corps, which I omitted from your bio.
Well, thank you. My name is Veronique Bellamy. I am a former lieutenant commander with the NOAA Corps, formerly aboard the NOAA ship Thomas Jefferson. And the reason why I'm running for the RTD board is I believe that we need to end the malfeasance that we've been experiencing for the last 12 years. And we need to be honest with the voters. As a former government employee and a former commissioned officer, I am offended that Judy Lubow continues to deceive the people of our district, pretending that she's working hard to get our rail, when the fact of the matter is her votes tell a completely different story. I think that we need to, but the thing is, we need to move beyond the mismanagement of RTD by Lee Kemp and Judy Lubow. We need to develop it. We need to strengthen RTD. We need to strengthen staff relations. We need to strengthen RTD's tax base. We need to strengthen RTD's revenue base. We need to spend our money smarter. We need to spend our money as an investment, not as just a cost. We need to do more with our resources so that we can finally rebuild the public trust and finally get our rail.
All right, Veronique, thank you very much. Lee Kemp, now your opening statement, if you will.
Thank you. And again, thank you for allowing me to speak today. My name is Lee Kemp. I was formerly an RTD board member and chair. When I was assigned or honored with the ability to be a RTD board member in 2005. In 2008, we had one of the worst economic meltdowns in Colorado, in the nation. And we were tasked very hard with revenue restraints that, definitely affected the revenue stream that was going to be part of the Fast Tracks program. We had to regroup and take a look at how are we going to keep the promise of the people? How are we going to get as much done as possible as soon as possible? So we went out and looked for every possible way to do that. One of the things that we were able to do was leverage a public-private partnership program with the federal government under the Bush administration, where we were able to leverage $1.03 billion of federal dollars to help pump in being able to push the Fast Tracks program forward, along with a private partnership bringing in over $600 million, and then our local funds where we were very strapped, so we were able to meet and be able to start getting lines done. Along with that, being able to prioritize and keep the program moving in all directions for the RTD. So we were able to complete the West Line. We were able to get the Northwest Line out of Denver up to Westminster. The North Line was at almost final signing in 2012. In 2012, I was really concerned that the Northwest area wasn't getting theirs. So another former board member and myself wrote the Northwest Mobility Study to be able to push that forward so that we could continue to make sure that the north side was going to get something. So that's where we stand.
Your time has expired, but thank you very much, Lee. Thank you. Thanks to all of you for your opening statements. Judy, I'll begin with you. First question for you. You all seem very focused on completion of the new RTD light rail lines, and I'm wondering, in terms of financing, how does RTD go forward to fund these projects?
Well, it's not simple. One of the major problems that we have with Fast Tracks is that we don't have the money to finish all that was promised. And that's a big problem. One of the problems was the Great Recession. Nobody forecasted that. But nonetheless, in hindsight, we were undercapitalized. We need more money. Okay, there are some promising things going on about getting more money, such as there are several groups, Metro Mayors, I believe US 36 Solutions, that are thinking about forming new transportation districts. When you form new transportation districts, the possibility arises is that you can raise money from that, either through going to the taxpayers or going to businesses in the district to fund new infrastructure. And so that's one of the options. Another option is that folks may not be aware of it, but the Contractors Association has recently done polling that has shown that the public is interested for the first time in years in transportation as a major issue. And so therefore, the possibility exists that we could go back to the public, actually, to raise a little more money to finish fast tracks as well as do other things. And I think since the public sees how incredibly powerful fast tracks has been for the areas in which it has been brought, that there might be interest in moving forward to do the remaining.
Veronique, you also favor aggressive new funding for RTD. How would you propose we accomplish that?
Well, basically, I think I am definitely aggressive in pursuing funding, but we need to do it in a responsible way that creates a sustainable transportation system that our children and our children's children can use. We can't do a get-rich-quick scheme like our friend Lee Kemp's public-private partnerships. We need to, and I know this is an unpopular idea, but we need to look at a gas tax, because a gas tax will help us get us out of these woeful public-private partnerships. They will help us get control of our rail back. They will help us improve the quality of service and quality of the line. They will reestablish confidence in RTD. And if we reestablish confidence in RTD, we can go back to the voters and they will look upon us a little bit more favorably. Tragically, the voters in my district do not look upon RTD favorably. The conversation is more about seceding from RTD than anything else. So we need to look at how to get more money, but the thing is, we need to improve our standing as well.
Lee, I'll ask you about the same question, and in fact, the public-private partnerships have been employed to accelerate some of the RTD projects to completion. Do you still see that as a viable avenue, and how would you champion fundraising for finishing additional lines?
I definitely think public-private partnerships are something that we need to continue to look at. Whether or not it fits a particular model that might be presented, I don't know. But it's definitely something that we need to continue to review to see if it's something we can help complete unfinished lines. I think we also need to also ask the voters, okay, we haven't gotten this line done to Longmont yet, but what are we going to do about at least guaranteeing the continuation of it? I think the voters are more concerned with not that it's not done, but when are you going to tell me it's going to move to the next step? What are you doing to, say, get it from Westminster to Louisville? What is the timing? What resources are you looking at to shore up the funding as funding gets cleared up through the bonding and so on that was done to support the other lines? Are we doing something that will allow X amount of dollars to move that forward? Working with the rest of the board too, collaborativeness and saying, hey, this is what's left out there. We need to reprioritize how we can continue to move all of Fast Tracks forward and definitely move the Northwest area forward. And I think by doing that and by incrementally doing it and keeping the voters involved, the constituents involved as to what you're doing is a key part of making this happen.
Lee, let me ask you our next question about first last mile connections. A very successful program underway in Centennial right now. Of course, it's a free ridership program where they are actually providing rides to individuals who would ride the train for free. They're providing that last mile connection. It's proven to be very successful so far. I'm wondering, what do you see as the future for first last mile connection programs? Is there a future for them, or is this just a pilot project that really doesn't have long legs?
No, I think it needs to continue to move forward, mature and see what goes on. Remember, this is a multimodal system. We need to be looking at all aspects on how we can move people that last mile. Right now we have the call and ride service. I think that has been very effective, but now with the introduction of Uber and so on, where does that fit into, the last mile scenario? What other things can be done to help continue to keep those that are on the outer edges of the district able to feel connected to the mainstream of this? All things need to be looked at.
Veronique, how do you see the first last mile connection problem?
Well, I see it I see the problem very big in my part of the district in Longmont, because we have a hub-based system where everything stops at 8th and Kaufman. However, we need to adopt a more grid-based transit program, because there are so many people in Longmont that are woefully underserved. I mean, for me to walk to a bus, it would take me 10 minutes, but I'm able-bodied. Imagine how much more it would take someone who is wheelchair-bound. Imagine how much more it would take someone on crutches. And that's just because I live near Main Street. What happens if someone lives near Hover or Alpine? Basically, we need to aggressively think about increasing our bus service, but also look at the call-in right as a way to gather data so that we can expand more bus service, so we can know where to develop, how to develop. We need to look at the call-in right as a way to measure demand.
All right, and Judy, how do you see the first last mile connection? And is the Centennial experiment, by the way, one that you favor?
I favor it greatly. I think the first and last mile is one of the major issues facing transit, and that if we can solve that, we can burst transit wide open and get a lot more transit riders. I love the fact that there is this Centennial program that is determining how best to integrate the new on-demand technology with RTD. And I know RTD is pursuing that further. We have applied for a federal grant for quite a bit of money to do our own analysis of integrating our transit with the new technology. And I think that has to go further and further and further. We are on the cusp of a transportation revolution with the on-demand technology, and we've got to integrate transit with that, and it's really going to burst things wide open. One thing I wanted to say is that one of the reasons that we don't have particularly great service in Longmont is that we don't have an enormous amount of ridership. That's just how it works. If you don't have good sustained ridership, you're not going to get good sustained fixed route service. So for that, we have to increase ridership, and one of the ways to increase it is by this first and last mile process, and so I totally support it.
I want to touch on the technology question. We do have this marvelous train system, state of the art, the envy of many cities all across our country, and it's used as an example often of how a train system ought to operate. But I'm wondering about the technology issue. The technology around light rail and heavy rail is exploding now. Veronique, I'll start with you. Do you think RTD is capable of being nimble enough to implement new technologies to make the system more rider-friendly and more accessible to those who perhaps at the moment might be avoiding it?
Well, thank you. As a computer scientist, I do believe that it's entirely possible that RTD could become ready to implement this technology and to be more nimble about its digital strategy. And unfortunately, the sad fact is that it hasn't been yet. But I hope that RTD can get to that position, and if I become director, I intend to aggressively push technology. I intend to aggressively push the usage of more data, more APIs meaning advanced programming interfaces for those of you not in the computer science world. More ways to measure and to perform better.
Lee, are you also a champion of technology? Do you think there are ways to integrate new technologies to make the system more accessible?
Definitely. And one of the ones right now that RTD is currently using is positive train control. That's a technology that RTD is on the cutting edge of it currently. A lot of the incidents, particularly that we've seen in the back east and in Philadelphia or in Pennsylvania and in New York, could have been prevented if they would have had positive train control. It's cutting edge technology. RTD's had a few hiccups with it, and you usually do with new technology. But I think they've done an excellent job in incorporating it and continuing to refine it and move it forward, and I think we're going to be better for it as time goes on. The use of next stop technology, knowing where the train is, when it's going to be there next. I think all of these things that RTD has implemented are all cutting edge, and I think continue to do that. One of the things that I'd like to see, though, is right now it's targeted that it would be diesel rail going up to Longmont from where it is right now due to some infrastructure issues. It's electric up to Westminster. I would like to see what those barriers are so that we can continue to use electric technology from Westminster on up to Longmont. So yes, positively tech savvy and tech supportive.
As a board member, Judy, you've been fairly supportive of technology. Do you remain so going forward, or do you think maybe we've crossed a line on technology and perhaps we need less?
Gee, when you say fairly supportive, I am passionately supportive of using new technology. I am convinced that in the next 10 years, we're going to see a new transportation system. Anybody who studies the issue knows that there are whole driverless vehicles, electric vehicles, all kinds of platoon vehicles. Things are going to be very different. And I firmly believe, and I've been pushing, and I will continue to push, that we need to see RTD get even more aggressive about integrating the new technology with our transit system. And that's just going to burst things wide open. As I talked about before, the first and last mile really has to be integrated with transit, but also new apps. RTD is cooperating with app manufacturers about them using RTD information to let the consumer know when buses, when trains are arriving. That's what millennials do, and we need to continue doing that. So I firmly believe that we need to be way ahead of the curve on new technology, and that's something that I want to bring up at the next board retreat for our next board goals.
Thank you. All right, our questions for the forum were provided by the Denver Metro Mayors Caucus, and this is another question that more or less touches on the direction that we're moving. The question is, RTD's revenue challenges have resulted in local bus service cuts and new service improvements being pushed further and further into the future. How would you, as a director, balance the need to improve regional mobility in the near term with the need to pay off debt? And Judy, I'll start with you. I'll say again, how would you balance the need to improve regional mobility in the near term with our need to pay off debt?
Well, one thing I want to say is that, you know, financial projections change every year. This year, we got a pretty bad projection. Last year, it was pretty good. So we have to learn to be flexible. That's how things work. It changes every year. I think that it is very important to move forward financially. And basically, that's all I need to say. Thank you.
Lee, the same question for you. How do we balance these two competing needs?
Well, we need to make sure it's sustainable, what we have currently, and we need to make sure that we don't make promises that we can't keep as far as service. And I think those are things that RTD has done well. We need to continue to do that well. Make sure that it's sustainable, and as we keep bringing on these new lines, make sure that we have a sustainable system that's going to last not just the next 10, 15, 20 years, but the next 100 years. A lot of things that happen in like back east, where infrastructure is falling apart. We need to be proactive today, making sure that we have a sustainable system, looking at how are we going to maintain this into the future, and then make sure that our growth can match that sustainable approach.
Veronique, same question for you, and I'll repeat it. How would you balance the need to improve regional mobility in the near term with the need to pay off substantial debt?
Well, the need to manage our debt is very important, and I believe that getting rid of these public-private partnerships will reduce the amount of strain on our pocketbooks. It will reduce the amount of strain on paying back those public-private partners. And plus, it'll also increase ridership as in service quality increases.
Yes, Judy, go ahead. That would be your opportunity to respond to that.
Yeah, yes, thank you. Basically, I wanted to say a bunch of things. In your original question, you talked about RTD cutting services, and we haven't been cutting services. In fact, the main priority has been to not cut bus services, so that we have cut bus stops, and that's not the same thing, basically, as cutting bus routes. So the board has been very clear to not use any of our funding for future things to cut what's happening in the present. We basically have very good mobility, and I think we're going to continue to have very good mobility. And we've been very clear that we want to be sustainable. There's no way that the board has been trying to increase things to the point of trying to cut what's present. And I think you have to be very clear about that.
Veronique, you would disagree?
Yeah, I do disagree. And Judy Lubo tried to cut my point off before by saying that closing bus stops is not necessarily the same as cutting service, but tell that to the person who lives at 15th and at Alpine. Tell that to the person that lives off of 13th and Hover. Tell that to the person who has to walk more now because Judy Lubo cut their stop.
Just a yes or no very quickly, because we're out of time. Just
No,
yes
I
or no.
understand. But basically, RTD is not a limousine service, so that if only one person is impacted, unfortunately, we have to look at the larger picture.
All right, and we can address this in closing statements, which we have arrived at the moment for. So each of you will have 1 minute each. Lee, I think we'll begin with this time. You will be first for your closing statement.
Thank you. And again, thank you for having me. In closing, if I get the opportunity to be elected to the board, I want to continue to show that I can be a collaborative asset to the board in helping identify what the needs are in District I. Identify those needs and get the support needed to continue to move the fast tracks to completion. And to also make sure the other board members in other areas get what they need as well. We need to be collaborative. That's one of the things that I've always been supportive of. I will continue to be supportive of. We need this thing done. The people paid for it. We need to complete it.
Judy, your closing statement, if you would, please.
Yes, I want to reiterate that I truly believe that government has a responsibility to provide what it says it's going to provide to the taxpayers. And I have been working incredibly hard to get us our rail sooner rather than later. And what that means in terms of the latest activity is that that RTD is looking at the idea of just rush hour service on our corridor as a means to start, getting our corridor moving, not as an end, but as a means. And that cost-saving idea was an idea that I had been promoting, and it's very exciting, and we might actually start seeing our rail sooner rather than later.
Veronique, your closing statement now, if you would.
I believe that Judy Lubo's statement that calling basic bus service limousine service is kind of shows how out of touch she is with the realities of taking transit in Longmont. I believe that we need to be responsible to the people that take our system. We need to be responsible to getting them what they want, not the board members. We need to get the people who ride the system what they need and what they want, and we need to get them to where they need to go. And we need to be more transparent, more forthcoming, and we need to deliver better. We need to improve our reputation with the voters and with the people of the district.
All right, Veronique Bellamy, Lee Kemp, Judy LeBeau, thank you all very much for your time today and for participating in our forum. Election Day is Tuesday, November 8th. Ballots will be mailed to all active voters in Colorado on the 17th of October. Voter service and polling centers will be open on the 24th of October. Voting will end at 7 p.m. on the 8th of November. You may register to vote at any time up to and including on Election Day. You can do so on the Colorado Secretary of State's website or in person at a voter service and polling center. And to receive a ballot by mail, you must have been registered by no later than October 31st.